we trying to do? To help members and ministers do two things. Personalize the vision and mission of Christ, and members as churches to do what? To localize. We're trying to move people from where? Having a love for God to having what? The love. Is there a difference between having a love for God and having the love of God?
Yes.
What's the difference? Humans have two types of love. What we call self-centered love, erotic love. Eros comes from that kind of love which is about me, myself, and I. Everything is about me, myself, and I. But we have a second type of love. We call it conditional love. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. That is a love that many couples have. If you fail in your deal, in the arrangement, then I can also hold back. That's what we call a self-centered, what we call conditional love. But the love of God is unconditional love. It's called agape love. And that is the love that Jesus came to make available to you. So when you allow Jesus to reproduce his life in you, what he is going to reproduce is his love, not your love. His faith and not your faith. Are we together?
Yes.
Why is this necessary? It is the call of what? Scripture. At least if you forget everything else, remember John 15. What does John 15 verse 5 say? Can you turn to the person next to you? I have repeated this 2-3 times today. At least you must remember to repeat it once. I am the vine, and you are the what? The branches. Abide in me, and I in you. If you abide in me and abide in you, you will bear what? Much fruit. And I want you to qualify. You will bear much of my fruit. That's our goal. This whole training is about getting us to stop producing our fruits and start producing whose fruit? The fruit of Christ.
Amen.
And what does Ephesians 4:24 say? Put on your new life. Do you all know that you have a new life that has been prepared for you?
Yes.
Whose life is that?
Christ.
The life of Christ. So Paul is saying every day, put on this new life. And when you put on the new life, you will not need to live your old life. The way you let go your old life is by putting on your new life. This is Paul's experience. What does Paul say? I have been obedient to the vision for my life. I no longer live. Jesus lives his life in me.
Amen.
So the question is, whose life are you living?
Jesus.
Whose side are you leaning on? I'm leaning on the Lord's side. Whose life are you living now?
I'm living on the Lord's side.
I live, living my... Somebody needs to write that song. So what have we established so far? This is time for reflection. What is the mission of the church? You have to turn to the person next to you and you give them the answer. But this time, when you give the answer, it has to have a Bible verse. So you have to tell them, according to Genesis 1:1, the mission of the church is ABC. So you have 1 minute to do that. And my sister there is all by herself. Can somebody sit next to her? You can't let anybody sit alone. Somebody has to sit with somebody. No, she has no choice today. Today we are not allowing anybody to sit by themselves. So everybody, you have 1 minute. What is the mission of the church? The answer you give must be based on a Bible. According to Genesis 1:1, the mission of the church is ABC. Okay, can you listen to each other and be prepared to mark each other out? Can somebody sit here with my sister? She's all by herself. Hello? You have to go and sit next to somebody there. We are moving everybody out. Yes. We are training you to be a disciple now. Okay? Has everybody got the answer? What is the answer? Can you see on the screen? The mission of the church is to do what? To make everyone the disciple of Christ and disciple makers. So ask the person, are you a disciple or a disciple maker or both? No, you ask them, don't answer, just ask them. Which one are you? Are you a disciple? Are you a disciple maker? You can't be a disciple maker before you become a who? A disciple. You cannot take people where you have not gone. Are we together? So to be a disciple maker, you first of all must be a who? A disciple. I want us to skip the second one. Okay, this one is, why does the church make disciples? Why is it important that as a church, we don't just make disciples, but we don't just preach and teach, but we make disciples? Why is that important? It's a command of Christ, number one. Number two, I want you to hear this. Unless you make disciples, you cannot grow the vision and mission of Christ in your church. Only as growing disciples can the church express and experience the full vision of God. Are you following? If you grow disciples, you will bring about the plan of God for your church. If you don't grow disciples, you will not bring about the plan of God for your church. What is God's vision for the church? Those of you who are in my first session, what is God hoping you become as a church? Do you remember this morning we talked about it? Let me go back. What did your parents hope you would be when you're growing up? Did they tell you? Did you have a clue?
Good Christian.
I didn't know what my parents wanted me to become. They didn't tell me. So as my children were growing up, I was very clear what I wanted them to become. Whether they became it or not is another story. But I was very clear. Yes, Helen was supposed to be a social worker like the mother, or a nurse. Eunice is supposed to be a pastor or a preacher. According to me, that's my plan for them. That's my vision. Are you hearing? Every wise, responsible parent has a dream for their child, isn't it? And if the Lord allows you, you make provision for them to become. So when you have a chance, you put in place what prepares them to become. That's what we do. God has the same plan for your life. He has a plan for the church, but he has also a plan for each of us individually. So let's look, what is God's plan for the church? What is number one? God's plan for the church, we talked about the first plan is becoming what? A temple and priesthood of worshippers. A family of friends. And a fearless army of what? Fruitful witnesses. So you can see it on the screen. God's plan is to make us a family or community of what? Faithful worshippers, fellowshipping friends, and fruitful witnesses or disciple makers. So ask yourself, how am I doing as a priest? How am I doing as a friend? How am I doing as a witness or soldier? That's God's plan. Where are we doing well? Let's look at as a church here. Where are you doing well and where are you struggling? Where are you failing? Because you remember we talked about the vision. The vision is a plan, isn't it? This is where God is taking you. And the reason why this is important, because that's how you measure yourself. If I know I am supposed to be in Birmingham, when I have been on the road for a whole hour, I need to be able to say, I am 3/4 of the way, because I know where I am going. But if you don't know the vision, how do you know even if you're going in the right direction? So this is why I say, if a church is not clear what God is calling her to be, how do you measure progress? How do you measure success? Have you seen the soldiers mark timing? And they can spend the whole day and they sweat and burn energy. How much movement do they make? 0. And it is possible as a church to come in, come out, every day, every week, and you are making no movement. Activity does not mean movement. So if God is calling the church to be this, what is God calling you and me to be on a personal level? Remember we talked about being called to be saints, being called to be sons, and being called to be soldiers. So how are you doing as a saint? How are you doing as a son or daughter in the family of God? Those are questions that you need to apply on a personal level. So let's finish up our reflection with this other question. Who is the disciple of Christ? So this is a little exercise. Stand to the person next to you. Give them the best answer you have. And remember, you must base it on a Bible verse. According to Revelation 21:21. Who is the disciple of Christ? Who is a disciple? What is the answer we got this morning? A disciple is one who is a disciple is one who is but we say the general meaning of a disciple is a learner. But the disciple of Christ is more than a learner, is more than a lover, is more than a follower, is more than a witness. Who then is the disciple of Christ? Galatians 2:20. Galatians 2:20. My life is no longer mine. It is Christ who lives in me. So who is a disciple of Christ? The one who is living the life of Christ, but not just living that life. They are also reflecting that life. So the disciple of Christ, one who is living and reflecting who? Jesus. So the big question you need to ask yourself every day, whose life did I live today? At the end of the day, when I come to the end of the evening before I sleep, I take a few minutes to look back at my life and I ask myself, whose life did I live today? Whose words did I speak today? Whose thoughts did I think today? Were they my thoughts or his thoughts? Were they my words or his words? Were they my works or his works? Whose errands did I go for? Are you following? Let's be honest. Can you look back and say that this week I have spent 2 hours going for Jesus or doing errands for Jesus? Because that's what you're called for. Okay, let's finish this one. To follow, live, and reflect Christ requires we must do certain things. Daily look and listen to Jesus. Daily learn and live for Jesus. Daily lead others to Jesus. Daily train to memorize, meditate, mind, and minister the words and works of Christ. Daily trying to hear, heed, and hide what? The words of Christ in my heart. So I'm going to switch that one off. I want you to turn to the person next to you and summarize to them what are the 5 things they need to do every day starting with an L. What are the 3 things they need to do every day that start with a H? And what are the 4 things they need to do every day that starts with an M? So use your hand. Let's start with the ones for L. What are they? Number 1, looking. What is the Bible verse for that? Hebrews 12 and verse 2. What does it say? Look to Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. What is the second one? Listen. What is the verse for that? John 5:24. He that hears my word and believes in the one who sent me has eternal life.
Amen.
What is the third one? Learn. What is the scripture for that? Matthew 11:29. Take my yoke upon you and do what? Learn from me. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Number 4. Live for Jesus. What is the Bible verse for that? Galatians 2:20. I am crucified with, I no longer, who is living his life in me? Christ is living his life in me. And what is the last L? Leading others to Jesus. What is the Bible verse for that? Matthew 28 and verse 19. Go ye into all the world and do what? Make the nations to be my congratulations. Look at the person next to you and give them a 5. Tell them, well done. Well done. Now, the first one was easy. What are the 4 ones that start with an M? Memorize, meditate, mind, and number 4, minister. Meditate on the words and works of Christ. Memorize them. If you want to meditate on them, memorize them. The reason I memorize them is because when I have free time, when I'm driving and I come by the lights or the traffic is slow, I don't let my mind wander. I just go to my bank of scriptures and pull up the scripture and begin to memorize. Have you tried to sleep at night and you can't get sleep? I don't build castles in the air. I just go back to my Bible verses. I begin to draw them. I go to Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Genesis 3. I try to memorize. I draw them out and I begin to meditate on them. You see, if you don't deposit, you cannot withdraw. Isn't it? Can you go to your bank to withdraw if you never deposited? No. Do you remember Jesus telling his followers, never worry when they bring you before committees, before you will be given something to do what? To speak. This is my simple principle. My goal every year is to deposit at least, my goal is 52 because I have 252 weeks. But if I don't make 52 and only manage 30, can you imagine you are able to engrave in your long-term memory 30 verses every year? How much is that in 10 years? 300. That is a powerhouse. You have embedded in yourself the very power. You remember how Jesus dealt with the devil? It is written. And you want to bring yourself to the place where everything you do can have its source in Scripture. So that's why we say, what are the 3 other disciplines that begin with a H? Hear, heed, and hide. Psalms 119. Thy word have I hidden in my, that I may not do what? Sin against you. Let me tell you, all these things we do, the Bible study, the prayer, the scriptures, they are not an end in themselves. They are a means to bring us to the place where Jesus can live his life through each of us. Now, how does the church make disciples? So this morning we looked at what is the mission? Making disciples. Why do we make disciples? That's the way. How does the church make disciples? Please stand with me, if you don't mind. Are you able to stand with me? Repeat after me. You are the salt of the earth.
You are the salt of the earth.
But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. So turn to your neighbor, tell them you are the salt. You are the light. Please be seated. Gentlemen, although you have come late, you have to come and sit here where the preacher is seeing you. You can't sit there. I need to see your face. I want to know that what I am saying is getting through to you. Amen? Amen. Thank you. Oh, and you have to sit right in the front there, my elder. Important question. Why did people come to Jesus? Have you ever asked yourself? There are three reasons why people came to Jesus and became his disciples. Number one, it is because of what they heard about Jesus and from Jesus. Do you remember this morning we looked at John chapter 1? When John the Baptist is standing, and next to John the Baptist are two disciples. What does John the Baptist say? Behold the Lamb of God who takes away. And the two disciples who are next to him, what do? They followed. So people will come to Jesus because of what they hear other people say. That's number one. The reason why they become the followers of Jesus is because of what they see from Jesus and what they experience from Jesus. Don't miss those. They come because of what they hear. The reason they become is because of what they see and what they experienced. Look at the stories of all the characters. What they saw, what they heard, what they experienced. And Jesus knew it. That's why his strategy appeals to the sight, it appeals to the ears, but it also appeals to the experience. So how did Jesus look at his methods? What was his strategy? His strategy had three approaches. Number one, he showed the people God's love and salvation. How did he show it? He healed the sick, he fed the hungry, he comforted the bereaved, he visited with the isolated. So he wanted them to do what? To see the love of God in his actions. When they saw it and they were wondering, then he spoke it. He began to explain it. He gave meaning to what they saw. Those who responded, he then trained or schooled them to experience it.
Amen.
How many ways? So he showed it, he spoke it, and he schooled them to live. Do people today need the same to come and become disciples? Yes.
Yes.
So look at the method of Jesus. This is the method of Jesus. One of our writers, the servant of the Lord, captures the method of Jesus. And I want you to notice two words, what she says. Christ's method alone. Do you get that?
Yeah.
Don't try two other methods. There is a method alone that will give you true success. Not just success, but what kind of success? True success. So I want to give you a little exercise. I want you to look at the method of Christ that is summarized on the screen for you, and together with the person seated next to you, can you identify the things Jesus did? So, do you still have your little booklet? Do you still have your booklet? Okay, I want you to go to page 15 of your booklet. You have a space for notes. And if you don't have your booklet, you can pick one here. If you forgot to come with yours for the afternoon. So go to page 15 of your booklet. There's a space for writing. We want you, together with the person seated next to you, to identify what are the things that Jesus did in his method. Do you need a pen? Everybody has a pen, or somebody needs a pen? Okay, you need to walk across there. On the second pew, there is a little bag, black bag with some pens. And then you can share it with any other people who need. Can you see that one? Does it have some pens inside? Yeah. Okay, come out with them and share with others. What are the things that Jesus did? Identify them. List them out with the person sitting next to you. What did Jesus do in his methods? Okay, are we done? Are we listed out? Okay, you have 1 more minute. She's over. Okay, let's look at them. What are the things Jesus did? Number 1, he mingled with how many? Jesus mingled with all. Number 2, no, you missed out. He desired their good. Jesus was not mingling with them for his own agenda. He was mingling with them for whose agenda? Their agenda. It was about them. And number 3, he showed his sympathy for them. Number 4, he ministered to their immediate needs. So he mingled to make friends. He ministered to win what? Their confidence. And number 5, he bade them to do what? To follow him. And the only other thing he did is later, those who accepted his invitation, he instructed or trained them to be disciples who are disciple makers. So you can summarize the method of Jesus in 3. He mingled to make friends. He ministered to win confidence. Then he invited and instructed them. Mingled, ministered, invited, instructed them. How many ways? 4. The church makes disciples by doing 3 things. What are they? Showing the gospel. Number 2, speaking the gospel. And number 3, schooling and training those who accept to live the gospel. But before I go too far, who is the church? So go to your booklet, the last page, page 16. I want you to read the statement at the bottom of page 16. What does it say? In the New Testament, the church is not a what? A building, an organization, a doctrine, or a denomination. What is the church? The church is always people. How many? And finally, a congregation. So by yourself, you are a church. That's why Paul says, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit makes you God's church wherever you are. When you're a small group as a family, you and your family, you are a church where you live. And as a congregation, you are God's church in this part of his vineyard. So when we come about making disciples, it isn't just a corporate church. It is even the individual church. So wherever I am, I must see myself as God's representative. So all these things apply. If people have to become disciples, I must first of all show the gospel to them. Then speak the gospel to them. And those who respond, I must school or train them to live the gospel. So let's do some marks, some scoring of marks. Let us try to score ourselves as a church globally. When it comes to the 3, where do we do well and where do we fail? So I'd like you to give a score. When it comes to showing the gospel, if we score 1 to be poor, 2 to be average, 3 to be good, how do we score as an Adventist church globally when it comes to showing the gospel? 1, 2, or 3?
3.
Poor, average, or good?
Good.
Showing the gospel.
Yes.
Okay?
Good.
Thank you. We will score between 1 and 2 when it comes to showing the gospel. Some are very poor, and the majority of us are just average. You see the reason why in a little while. When it comes to speaking the gospel, how do we score? 3 out of 3. There is no faith group that has perfected our ability to speak the gospel like Seventh-day Adventists. If there was 10 out of 10, we would get 11 out of 10. When it comes to schooling or training those who accept to live the gospel, how do we perform? Between 0 and 1%. Are you seeing the point? Away from the global church, let us come to Reading West. How do you score in terms of showing the gospel, speaking the gospel, or schooling people to live the gospel? Which do you do well? Peter, you're the first elder of this church. Can you mark your church? You're marking your members. You remove yourself a bit. How do you mark the members? Where do we do well and where do we fail? Many of our churches do well in terms of speaking the gospel corporately. But when it comes to showing the gospel, when it comes to training or schooling people to live the gospel, we don't do very well. Are we together? And this is what this session training is all about. It's about us being able to reflect the way Jesus did his method. So how does the church show the gospel? We're not talking about speaking the gospel. We'll come to speaking the gospel. How do we show the gospel? Jesus gave us a good example. In the book of Ephesians 5, 25 to 27, Paul is writing to the husbands. How many husbands are here? If you're a husband, please stand. If you're a husband, please stand. Paul says to you men, love your wives as Christ loved the church. So the big question is, how did Jesus love the church? So you ladies, can you be quiet now? Let the men speak for themselves. How did Jesus love the church? If you can't answer that question, you need a pastoral visit. How did Jesus love the church? Jesus loved the church in 3 ways. Number 1, what he did for the church. In verse 25, he died, he gave his life for her. So what he did for her, without involving her, he did something for her. So the big question for you husbands is this: what have you done for your wife this week? I can tell you what I did for my wife this week. I prayed for her. When she came home from work, I sang for her. Amen? Amen. Yeah, when she woke up next to me in the morning, I say to her, welcome to a new day and welcome to a new darling. I'm going to love you today. Amen. You see how always smiling. You know why she's always smiling? No. So I'm trying to get you to do something. It's a question of being proactive, not reactive. It's about thinking before you get out of your bed in the day, what am I going to do for her today? And you think through and you look through, where am I likely to do something? I pray for her every day. That's one thing. So number 1, what are you as a church doing for your community? So that's one of the things. The second thing that Jesus did is what he did to the church. He did something for the church. He died for her in order to cleanse her, in order to purify her, in order to make her what? Beautiful. So the big question is, what did you do to her? You may have prayed for her. She wasn't there. You may have sung for her. These are things you did by yourself. But from doing things for her, what did you do to her? Did you talk to her? Did you touch her? You know, things like those, where you are being personal. That is how we show love. So the second question is for you as a church, what have you done to your community? And number 3, what Jesus did with the church. So he did something for the church, did something to the church, did something with the church. 3, 4, 2, with. Please be seated. So the third one, we want you to answer us. What did you do with her this week? So yesterday I had the privilege of just going with my wife and our daughters to South End, and I spent the whole day just walking up and down. You know, I was telling them, I was sharing with my friends the other day, and she's here. This year was a very unusual year. Valentine, you know, we would send each other cards, but not do anything very big. But our daughter was engaged this year. She was engaged last year. So she was going to get married. She got married, you know, a few weeks. Is it last week? Yes. So my daughter sat me down and says, Dad, what are you doing for mom this year? For Valentine? I said, no, I just send her a card, you know, the usual thing. She said, this is a very different year. Because you know I'm engaged. My husband to me is going to send me a big bouquet of flowers. Can you imagine? I am not yet married, and he's going to send these big flowers that are going to sit in your sitting room. You've been married 30 years plus, and you have nothing you're going to send your wife. I felt, wow, this is a slightly big one now. So I said, what do you think I should do? Says you should buy her not a bouquet of flowers like that. You should buy her even better. I said, wow. So I said, where do you buy those flowers? Because I know when he is sending you the flowers, you're also going to be sending. So she took me to a website where she will be buying her flowers. You know how much the flowers cost? 40 pounds and 10 pounds to send. I said, Lord have mercy on me. So she gave me all the directions. She said, okay, I'm not going to put you under pressure, but just make sure you buy any other flowers, but please don't go and buy flowers at Asda's for her. Those are not going to be accepted. So I made the plan. So I went and shopped the flowers. I looked at the delivery cost, 10 pounds. And then they were going to be delivered by a florist next to, not far from where we are. So I decided to go over to the florist and look at the flowers myself. The flowers are 40. Why do you get another 10 pounds? Just walk over, buy them, and take them home. Save the 10 pounds. Now, I saw the flowers and decided I was going to come and buy them. Because, first of all, the ones that were there, they had been there for a few days. I wasn't very impressed with them. You know, I got so busy in the office. By the time I remembered, turned up at the florist, it was closed. You know, 6 o'clock in the morning, I was at Asda's. Because there was no other place I could go. It is the only place open. And I bought the most expensive flower that was there. Even if it was going to cost me 100, I was going to buy 100. But I bought the best flowers I could get. You know, I was walking out there, every man was wishing me, you know, happy Valentine's Day. And I said, this is a new conversion for me now. And I took them home. You'd have seen the joy on my wife's face. I just realized, oh, she's been missing these flowers all the years. You see, you know what I'm saying? It's never too late to learn. It's because of my daughter that I've learned. Now I have, you know, every other week when I go shopping, I buy flowers. I even have come to love flowers.
It's good when a husband brings his wife flowers.
It's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Wives have to also love the flowers. You know, it depends on where you come from. Yeah.
No, it is very surprising. I wish every husband could bring their wife.
But not all women also like
Flowers.
Never mind.
You know, I never used to take a lot. I have also begun to love them. You know, I think if you discover what your spouse loves, you also begin to love them, isn't it?
yeah.
The point I'm saying is this: how do we show the gospel? Look at Jesus. What he did for, what he did to, what he did with. And I want you to apply that to your church. So Reading West Church, what are you doing for your neighbors? Question number 1. What are you doing to your neighbors? And number 3, what are you doing with your neighbors? Those are the 3.
Can I give you an answer?
No, not now. A disciple-making church has to embrace 3 habits. I use the acronym B. B stands for bringing the gospel to the people in order to bring the people to who? To Jesus. That's habit number 1. On a personal level, on a corporate level. Habit number 2, establishing and growing all who respond to the full life of Christ. And habit number 3, empowering all disciples to be disciple makers. Those are the 3 essential, non-negotiable habits of a disciple-making church. Did you get them? A disciple-making church must bring the gospel to the people and not wait for the people to come. Did you get that? Most of the time we wait for the people to do what? To come. But look at Jesus. He did not wait for us to respond to what heaven was doing. He came and brought heaven to us. We too must take the gospel to where the people are. Number 2, the church must show and speak the gospel. Jesus said, we are first to be salt before we are light. What does salt do? Salt does 3 things. It gives flavor, salt preserves, salt heals. For salt to do those, it must mingle. If it does not mix with the food, if it does not mix with the sick place, if it does not mix with what needs to be preserved, its ingredients cannot benefit. The same thing, that for you and me to bring light to others, for us to bring healing and flavor, we must mingle with them. That's why the church must follow the example of Christ. What did he do? He mingled, he ministered, and then he invited people. Follow me. So, the church, like Christ, mingles with the community to make friends. The church ministers to win confidence, and the church ministers the gospel to make disciples. So let's do a little exercise. What is Reading West doing to make friends in the community? Can you turn to the person next to you and share with us? What is one thing you're doing as a church? Not to make people disciples, but to make them your friends. Before you think of showing them what you know, let them know how much you care. So what are you doing in this church? To make friends, to make your neighbors friends. Feeding the homeless. Okay, that's the second level. That's building confidence. Feeding the homeless is one of them. What else are you doing as a church? Health expos. So let me give you a few examples. At Balaam, we did specific activities. We had what we called these friendship-making activities and confidence-building activities and disciple-making activities. How many? 3. They are activities to make friends. They are activities to build confidence and trust. And they are activities to do what? To make disciples. Don't mix them up. So here we are as Balaam Church. Every second Sabbath of the month, we went to the high street. A group of us, 20 plus, and we did 3 things. We sang, we prayed, and we distributed literature. Just for an hour. Specific spot. There was a group singing, and there are others who are praying. So below there you see Sister Nancy, right there at the bottom there. She's among the prayer teams. So there are members who paired up in 2s, and they position themselves at strategic position with a simple board saying, we are here to pray for you and with you. And people stopped for prayers. And as you stop for prayers, you take their contacts. They take your contacts. What are you doing? Just making friends. People see you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So place yourself where people can see you. A community relevant church is visible. She positions herself where the people are. The majority of us, we love to be together. But then we are out of here, the society does not even know we exist. So every second Sabbath of the month, what did we do? We mingled with our community. Every third Sabbath of the month, we mingled with our neighbors. So what did we do? We went around the church, listed all the roads around the church, and identified the number of homes in each road. So these are the roads around the church, and the number of homes in each road. Then we came to church and paired every Sabbath school class, assigned them a number of streets and said, this is your mission field. Every Sabbath you meet, we want you to pray for the people in the street. And every third Sabbath, we want you to go out in the afternoon for an hour. We want you to prayer walk your street and begin to interact with your neighbors. Very simple activity. Pray for them, drop a literature. So as a church, personal ministries, the pastor, the elders, and the personal ministries, they sat down and they designed a number of little booklets and literature so that every month we dropped in our neighbors a little message, letting them know we were praying for them and are willing and desiring to pray with them. So we started 2016, December 2016. We put together a card, wishing our members a new year and letting them know we were praying for them. In January, we designed another small card that had simply prayer hands and promises. We let them know we were praying for them. February, we did something on marriage. We had a little booklet that talked about the benefits. So every month, as a church, we had an activity to mingle with our neighbors. Amen. I want you to notice, what are we trying to do? Make friends. We are trying to position ourselves where the people are. We are trying to go to the people. And some people will turn their doors against you. But there's somebody out of 100 doors who will be willing for your prayers. Amen. In the month of March, we designed a simple gift for Mother's Day. This time we did not drop it. We knocked every door. If there was a mother together with our children, we gifted them. And then we asked if they had any prayer request. Why? Because every Sabbath we went out to our neighbors and came back. We spent half an hour interceding for our neighbors, praying for the issues in our neighborhood. And let me tell you this, when you faithfully intercede for others, God will always open doors for you to intervene and interrupt their lives when they are going in the wrong direction. Do it with your children. Do it with your family. I have seen it. Girls who are growing up, and many times they are getting involved with friends in something we don't want them to do. And we say to them, don't go. And they insist on going. We say, okay, you plan your program. I am going to go on my knees, and that program is not going to take place. Amen. And more than once, for some reason, the program has been cancelled. Why? Because I interceded and the road interrupted it. Amen. You know, we have a lot of issues in our neighborhood. And you see, we are a church, and sometimes it's as if we don't care what is happening in our community. In case if you fail to do anything, at least do one thing faithfully. Intercede for your church. Intercede for your community. We knew at least one Sabbath in a month, as a church together, we were praying not just for everyone in general. No, every one of us. I'm praying for Enfield Road. Lord, have mercy on the people who live behind the doors here. And if there's a way we can be able... You see, prayer does not change God. Prayer changes you. And what prayer did is begin to change us so that we begin to see our community and our neighbors in a different way. We began to sigh for them. We began to burden for them. We began to avail ourselves to them. And the Lord began to open ways. Why? Because we were ready to serve. Why do we want God to bring people to us whom we don't even think about? We don't even care about. But the moment we begin to avail ourselves to God and say to God, we are ready to mingle and minister to our community, God is going to orchestrate their circumstances, and you will see them coming in. And the moment they come in, because I have been there looking for them, I am ready to receive them. But if they walk in and I have no clue who they are, whom do they come and meet in church? So you are a regular member of this church. Let me ask you, how many visitors visited our church today who are never met, we have never seen this church? Do you know any visitors who visited this church today? You don't know. Do you know the visitors? Do you know any one or two visitors who came to our church today who has ever been in this church? Do you know their names? You know what I'm saying is this. If I see myself as an agent of God, for those whom God is already working with, the moment they turn up, I can see God moving in their lives, and I am ready to walk alongside them to get them to the next level. But if I'm not praying or thinking about it, they will turn up to church, and I have no interest in them. They will come and go. And how many of our people or visitors have visited our church, and nobody even said hello to them? Why? Because we are not in the spirit of expectance. Because I don't see myself as a missionary. You have a little booklet with you? Go to page 3 of your booklet. Sorry, page 5. Are you on page 5? Page 5 of your booklet. Are you seeing there? God's vision for Adventist Sabbath School. Are you there, page 5? So let me ask you a question. A medical school trains doctors and nurses. A business school trains managers and accountants. Who does a Sabbath school train? Are you members of the Sabbath school? You all come to Sabbath school, isn't it? Who does the Sabbath school train? Who is the Sabbath school supposed to train? Look at your booklet there, page 5. A training school for? Can you see it up there? For disciple who? I want you to see the second comment. Ellen G. White counsels on Sabbath school. The second one, testimonies, page 74. Can you see there? The Lord desires that those who are engaged in the Sabbath school work should be who? Does everybody see that? Missionaries, able to go forth to the towns and villages that surround the church and give them what? Light of life to those who sit in darkness. So tell me, is that happening in your Sabbath school here? Are members leaving the Sabbath school class to go to their neighborhood to give light? They're not. We are not. So what am I saying? Is that a disciple-making church is very intentional and deliberate and consistent in making friends, in winning confidence. So you can see us here in Balaam. Not only did we every month mingle with our friends, every quarter we had a program in church where we invited our neighbors so that we could begin to build confidence. Health expo, cooking classes, family life seminars. These are for building what? Friendship. No, not friendship. Building confidence. And through them, then the other third thing is, we had disciple-making groups. So when people came to church, there were individuals or groups where they could be made disciples. Number 2, disciple-making churches don't just bring people, they also grow them to be like Jesus. And when we grow them to be like Jesus, number 3, the church is there to empower, so that we are not just growing disciples, we're also growing who? Disciple makers. Three things: showing the gospel, speaking the gospel, and schooling those who live. I want you to see the next statement. Turn with me to Hebrews 5:12 to 14. Hebrews 5:12 to 14, please. Hebrews 5:12 to 14. Welcome, Brother Nambo. Hebrews 5:12 to 14. What is Paul lamenting? Hebrews 5:12 to 14. Hebrews 5:12 to 14. What is Paul lamenting? What does he say? While you ought to be, you are still who? Learners. Do you get the gist? That when we come to Jesus, we must all begin like learners. But we are not to be there permanently. There is no professional learning in Jesus Christ, permanent learning. Those of us who are first learners must also become who? Teachers. That's why Ministry of Healing, page 149, the servant of the Lord says what? Every church should be a training school for Christian workers. Really, what I'm doing today, and I want to make it very clear, is a promotion. I am trying to appeal to your pastor and elders to make Reading West Church a training school for disciple makers. So that everybody who attends this church, one way or another, is given a chance to learn to be a disciple maker. Wherever you are leading other people to Jesus and growing them to be like Jesus. Every church is supposed to be a training school where people train to work for all. So let me look at it. How do you grow a disciple-making church? So can you help me? All that I have said, I want to summarize it now and then try to create a Q&A. How do we grow a disciple-making church? Number one, to grow a church of disciples who are disciple makers. In order to grow a disciple-making church, you need to grow a church of who? Disciple makers. Are you getting it right? For us to grow a disciple-making church, we must grow a church of disciple makers. So elder is here. Simple question. How many people attend your church on average? Every Sabbath. What's the average membership of Reading West? 250. 200, 250. I ask your pastor and ask your elders and got two different numbers. And I saying this is not very encouraging. One told me 220, another one said 150. It varies. So let's give it 200. If you have 200 members who attend this church every Sabbath, how many people joined your church last year? How many new people were joined to your church last year?
Through baptism or...
I'm saying the people who are not there before the beginning of the year and they became members of your church by the end of the year, how many were they? In whichever way they came, how many were they? I'm looking at how much growth you experience as a church. What percentage of growth did you experience last year?
Our growth depends on procreation.
Our children.
Just your children. So what are you saying is that you are 200 at the beginning, by the end of the year, there were no people who were baptized or new people who joined your church. How many were baptized? Bless the Lord. Even if they were your children, all I'm looking at, you started 200. By the end of the year, you had 201. So that is 0.1%. What I'm trying to find out is this. If you are 200 members, how many of the 200 are disciple makers? How many of them are active disciple makers? If they are not, then the first duty of the leadership is to make sure that everyone attending this church is taken back to class 1.
Amen.
And worked with until they become disciple makers. That is their goal.
Amen.
I want to take you to John chapter 15 and verse 1. And I want you to listen to some very scary warning of Jesus. This is what Jesus says. I am the vine. My Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he cuts it. Listen, you need to go to verse 6 to know what happens to that branch. That branch is put out to dry so that when it is thrown in the fire, it can burn quickly. Did you get it?
Yes.
Point number 2, verse 2. This is what Jesus said. Every branch in me that bears fruit, he prunes it so it will bear more fruit. So there is nothing like stagnation when it comes to Jesus. Either you have been cut or are being cut and drying out to be burned off, or you are being pruned. And if you're being pruned, it means that if last year you brought 1, this year you are bringing 2 or 3. So as a church, this is the one big question. Is Jesus cutting you off or pruning you? On a personal level. Because with Christ, there is no stagnation or barrenness. Each of us who is rightly connected will always be producing fruit, even by our surrounding and influence. Even when we are not saying a word, our very life will be producing and attracting people to Jesus. So, the big question is, if you really want to be a disciple-making church as Reading West, the starting point for pastor and leaders is to sit down and say, how do we grow everyone in this church to be a disciple maker? How do we train people to be disciple makers? And for you to do that, elders, listen, you first of all must become disciple makers yourself. A successful trainer must be able to model what they are training. They must be able to mentor others in the same. Unless you are a qualified nurse with a master's and an ability to train, you cannot be taken to train nurses. Can they take you from the street and teach you in a class and send you to train nurses? No. You have to experience it, and then you are skilled to be able to pass that knowledge to others. So I would say the challenge to you is, how do you come to the place where as a leadership you can say with confidence, we have 100 people and we know with certainty 50% of them are effective or mature disciple makers. Another maybe 40 or 20% of the remaining are at the baby stage. Do you remember the stages we talked about this morning? Baby stage, youth stage, adult stage. So if you take the 200 people who are attending your church, how many of them are at baby stage? They still need milk to grow. How many of them are youth stage? They can do ministry here, but they are not yet adult to produce young ones. So the key thing is, you must learn how to grow a disciple, a church of disciple makers. Now notice the second point. For us to grow a church disciple makers, we must grow a disciple making what? Culture. What is culture? Culture is a way of life. It is beliefs, behavior, and also the narrative or stories we tell. It is the language that we speak to each other. So this morning I asked you to begin speaking a new language. You know the language I asked you to speak? We are no longer going to refer to each other Brother Singo or Sister Peter. We're going to call him Sister Peter. No. Saint Peter. Saint Grace. Saint Michael. Can you begin that language here? If you begin to speak that language, you're going to begin asking people to change the way they are thinking and seeing themselves. Because the moment you call me a saint, already you are requiring of me a particular way of behaving, isn't it? A certain standard. When I refer to him as when I refer to him as Mwalimu Singo, already I am suggesting, when people address me as pastor, you know, already they have created certain expectation.
Yes, that's right.
This is how we want you to report yourself. This is how we want you to carry yourself. So titles matter. And the language we speak is going to influence the way we see ourselves. And so I'm suggesting that even besides our beliefs, our mission and vision statement, the second thing we need to look is at our routines and behaviors. Whenever we meet, what is in our meeting to help us to become disciple makers? What is in our language? We have to create and communicate a simple, clear vision and mission. We have to grow disciple making structures and routines in all our meetings, from Sabbath school to the divine service to the afternoon meeting. In each of them, there must be something about elder. How many people have you discipled this week? Are we seeing it that way? In fact, I want you to go and look at your Sabbath school lesson. Do you have your handout with you? I want you to go to page 6. Oh, sorry, let's leave those in for now. But if I did the lesson today, I usually do the Sabbath school lesson in a slightly different way. I ask the people to read all the passages, and I ask you 5 questions. So let's do a little exercise. Sabbath school. Did you read your lesson this week or the Bible verses? Question number 1. What did you learn about God from your reading this week? Do you remember what you read? Number 2. What did you learn about human beings or yourself? That's question number 2. Question number 3. How did you feel about God and how did you feel about yourself? So this morning, remember, we were talking about ministry in the New Testament church, isn't it? And our key verse was James 1:27. Pure and sincere religion before the sight of God the Father is caring for the orphans and widows and keeping yourself from being corrupted by the world. That was a key text. And then we looked at 3 stories. We looked at the early church, we looked at the story of Dorcas, we looked at Paul, and then we looked at James. Those are the verses we looked at. When you had read all the verses, you must be in a position to answer 5 questions. Question number 1, what did you learn about God? That he cares about the need, isn't it? He cares about orphans. He cares about widows. He cares about people who are suffering. Number 2, what did you learn about human beings? That we can be selfish, we can be uncaring. That's why we have to constantly be reminded of need to do that. How did you feel about God and how did you feel about yourself? I felt great that I believe and serve a God who cares. I feel a bit disappointed that as human beings, though sometimes we know God, we can ignore other humans around us and think we're still serving God. Point number 4. What are you going to do about it prayerfully and practically? What are you going to do about it? We learned from Dorcas that she set aside a portion of her income to help the needy and the poor. So let's ask ourselves, how many of us in our monthly budget, we set aside tithe, we set aside offerings, and then put something, what we call the needy neighbor. Yes, I've trained myself. I've set something aside, 10% for my tithe, I set a certain percentage for my offerings, and I always put aside 5%, and I say to the Lord, Lord, this is for the needy neighbor that you're going to bring in my life this month. That means I have tuned myself into the mind of God to care for the people around my life. But I want you to see point number 5, which many of us in our classes and classes miss, is this. Who are you going to share with what you learned and experienced this week when you go out of this place? That means every time the Lord reveals himself to us, it is not just for ourselves. It is for somebody at your workplace. It is for somebody in your family. It is for somebody in your neighborhood. And if you do not ask God to lead you to that person, how then will you end up being a disciple maker? Do you see the difference? A church that trains its members to be disciple makers, it's not just a question of what we have learned for ourselves. It is who is going to be blessed through your life by God this week. And that means that before I leave that learning space, I go on my knees and say to God, lead me to somebody in my workplace. Lead me to somebody in my neighborhood. Lead me to somebody in my circle of family who needs to know what you have made known to me. And this is the interesting part. Teachers, if we leave the Sabbath school class with a conviction and a commitment to share with somebody else what God has revealed to us, the next time we meet, the first story I want to tell you is how God opened the door for me to tell Jesus to somebody in my neighborhood. That means when we come to the Sabbath school report, we don't only have to tell what God is doing in India and Africa and Asia. No, I want to also tell what God is doing in the neighborhood of Reading West. Amen. Are you seeing? That's why the Sabbath school, the portion, the handout I gave you, there is a portion there that speaks about a disciple-making Sabbath school class. That the goal of Sabbath school is not to inform, it is to transform our lives. That at the Sabbath school class level, hear me church, every Sabbath school class should have 50 minutes. How much time? 50 minutes. 10 minutes for fellowship, where we care and share with each other. 30 minutes for reflective study of God's word, where we answer those 5 questions. What did we learn about God? What did we learn about each other, our humans? What are we going to do about it? Who will we share with? And then the last 10 minutes should be spent training and stirring the class so that we become disciple makers. We go from the class not to sleep, but to serve others in our life. Are you following? A disciple-making class, church, ensures that every program, every activity is growing people who are disciple makers. And finally, growing discipleship pairs, growing teams and groups. So let me give you a story of one of our small churches that has done something very radical. And the good news is one of the people who has been instrumental to that came from this church here. As pastor at Balaam Church, 2016, you see, as a pastor and as a leader, Peter, there are only 2 things you can do when it comes to discipleship. And this is something that I'm doing to you today, and I do every church. 2 things you can do. Cast the vision. Let people know what God's plan and program for their life is. So I cast the vision, I clarify the vision, and then I call people to commit themselves to the vision. Are you following? Casting the vision, clarifying the vision, and calling people to commit themselves to the vision. Those who are convicted and committed as a church, as a leader, you begin to train them to become disciple makers. And so at Balaam, in 2016 to 2017, we started a class of training disciple makers. So every 4th Sunday of the month, from 10 to 2, we just met and began to study together and began to practice together these components of disciple making. I started with 20 people. By the time the class was ended, 10 meetings later, we had come to 16. Then the same class went for the second year. And out of the 16, we had about 12 people. Out of the 12 people, 6 people from that class emerged. And wherever they went, they were committed to influence others to be disciple makers. So there is a pair, a couple that met, was my class, Emmanuel and Tracy Kujo. They trained, and then they went to a small group called Mitcham. Mitcham was a group with about 15 people. 15, 16 people. They embedded themselves there, and they began to work with that group. And that group was willing. For the next 9 months, they trained the group in terms of how do you mingle with your community, how do you minister to your community, and then they put plans in place to invite the community. The one advantage they have is that they meet in a community hall where there are many other activities taking place. So all they did was to create a program by the church, their group, that would help them to mingle with the community. And what they did is to say, we are not going to create, we're going to look what is already in existence, which we can use to make friends with our community. So look at the screen. So the first thing they were looking, on the green side, their number one activity or goal, how do we make contacts and friendship in the community? So they decided they were going to do 2 activities. Number 1, a community movie night. And number 2, a community concert. So they designed a program, looked for a nice film that talked about values. In fact, it's the story of somebody in a part of Africa who out of their skills was able to turn their dry region to become an area that was growing food. And they went and invited the families, and they had a good, almost 10, 40 people come from the community to just come and spend an evening together, and they had a lot of activities. This is the interesting part. While they were doing the community movie night, they had already planned in a month's time to do a community concert. So when people came for one program, the other second one was already in motion, already planned and being advertised. And the community concert was very interesting because it was a concert by the community. So they went around and said, is there any music you'd like to come and sing? Why don't we just come together and exchange music as a community? So somebody came, they were doing their own violin. All the group did was to try and identify the community gifts and then to add their gift of gospel to that. So on a Sabbath afternoon, they invited the community, and the community came out. Why? Because some of them were doing songs, others were doing poems, others were doing different things. While they were doing the community concert, they had already planned a community cafe. So in a month's time, they had designed a program. You know what a community cafe was? It was a fellowship lunch on a Sabbath afternoon where the community is invited to. So when people came for the concert, they were invited to the what? Community cafe, once a month. Why don't we just come in the afternoon and eat together? And the food being provided, we're inviting people to come and learn how to eat healthy, happy eating. When they came for the community cafe, they had already organized a community care team. The care team is a team of individuals whose work is to see who is struggling with issues and needs help in society. Do you see the arrangement? That you are making friends. When you make friends, they created a group between the church and the community. They called it a Mitcham Care Group. Our care group is there to meet the needs of individual members in the community. Some people have financial needs, others just need family support, all kinds of support. And because of that, they were able at a later time to create a number of the people who came for the concert and came for the cafe. Many of them now also wanted to share in the care group that was being offered. And because they came and ate lunch and they said, what else do you do here? They were very happy with what was happening there. What else do you do here? No, on Sabbath in the morning, we meet for Bible study. And they began to meet for Bible study. That was 1 year ago. And out of the people who came, we had about 4 families that started attending church from the community.
Amen.
I'm telling you something that is taking place. June this year at camp meeting, we were able to be introduced to a mother and 2 children who have been attending, who came to the concert because their children were miming in the concert. They loved the cafe. From the cafe, they came to the care group. They have come to church. They just love the church. They've never been part of a faith group like that. And now they're enjoying it. What does it mean? That we can create activities that bring people in here. So we had a mother and her 2 children who came all the way to come meeting, to come and tell the story of why they loved that group. And just this week, I got some interesting news. So I'm telling you what happened in June. That group is still going on. The last month alone, this lady and her 2 children have brought their neighbor who has 2 children. The neighbor and the 2 children are coming. And now this neighbor who has been invited has also invited their friends. What are we saying? That when we begin to care and love for people, there are many people around us, they don't care your color or language. They care whether you care for them. So I can show you a picture so the picture on the right, that is just a small portion of the care of the group. Please don't take a picture of that. I would like to suggest don't take that picture. So on the right, 2 weeks ago, they went to, they were having a park, an outing in the park. So you can see a portion of them. And this is, so only a small group. The picture on your left at the bottom, that is Tracy and Manu. Those are the 2 people who are instrumental in changing a group of about 15 people, and those 15 people now are able to attract people in the community. Are you more than 15 in this church? Yes. If 15 people can be able to bring a group from the community, what about 100? Question: what have you learned this afternoon? Turn to the person next to you and share with them. Are you just a disciple or a disciple maker? Do you have your handout with you? Turn to page 11, please. Page 11. There is a section called Personal Reflection and Learning. Have you seen it? Page 11. Everybody goes to page 11. If you don't have your handout, please pick one. I want you to pick one here. This is an application part. We have a lot of them here. Page 11. How many friends, family members, and others are you daily or weekly interceding for as seeking to show and share Jesus with? So I want you to stop. I want you to just close your eyes. From your family, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, how many of those people are you interceding for? How many are you praying for God to help you show Jesus to them and share Jesus with them? Is there anybody? Share with the person sitting next to you. If you are not currently interceding for anybody, this whole training was just about getting you to start doing that. I hope all of you received a little booklet. Elder Singo, did you have that booklet? It's nice to be nice. Not that one. There's another book. Did everybody receive a little book says it's nice to be nice? Yes. That book has practical ways to help you begin the routine of being a disciple maker. This morning, I suggested ways for you to be a disciple. Okay? So has everybody got this? Is there anybody who didn't get it? Elder, are there still some more there?
Close your eyes, I'll give only one.
Sister Nancy, in the car at the back, there is the big bag. I carried a few more. Saint Nancy. Amen. Even the preacher can be trained. Saint Nancy, can you help get a few more at the back? There's a bag. How many people? Really what I'm calling us to do is to be able to live our faith on a different level. It's about being conscious and taking stock of how Christ is living his life in you. If I'm daily looking at him, then automatically I'll find ways of leading others to him. Or the key is, the key I think is in the bag. Yes. On the side of the bag. Is there anybody you're praying for at the moment? If there isn't, the starting point is that. Where I say to the Lord every day, Lord, as I step out of this house, I am going for you. Lead me to, and let me tell you what I've come to discover. The moment you make yourself available to God, God is going to lead you to people he's already working with. There are people out there who God is already working with. And I tell you, don't go looking for them. Ask God to lead you to them. As long as you are available. The Bible says, if you are willing and obedient, you will eat the good of the land. Amen. Somebody told me this week, Pastor, the issue with many of our members is, just because you are willing and able, but if you are not committed, and this is the key thing, obedient. You have heard Jesus saying to you very well that you are my light. You are the salt. But I cannot be able to bring flavor to other people's lives if I don't mingle myself with where people are. That's why to me, when I step out of the house, I say to the Lord, Lord, whom do I need to bring favor to today? Whom do I need to bring light or healing to? I am your servant. Use me today. When you pray that prayer before you set out, watch what God will do for you and you through you. But that is the way you ready ourselves to be disciple makers. It may be possible you haven't experienced that, but I want to encourage and challenge you. So the two challenges I've given you today. Number one, the challenge of being a disciple. Every day, training yourself to look, to listen, to learn from Jesus. When you do the three, then you position yourself where you can live for Jesus, but also lead other people to who? To Jesus. If the first one is not taking place, the second one is not going to happen. You cannot lead people where you have not gone. Remember Jesus, what he said? You are my witnesses. Who is a witness in a court of law? In a court of law, a witness must tell what they saw, what they heard, and what they experienced. That's why I'm saying to many of us, because we do not the experience of looking and listening and learning from Jesus, we are not able to go leading other people to Jesus, because where can we lead them if we were not there ourselves? So my first appeal to you is that train to be a daily disciple. Then you will know the experience of daily making others the disciples of Christ behind you.